Welcome, fellow surfers. We have a very energetic week coming up, and the results of this surf report and all the methods that we use to triangulate the energies will surprise you. I promise you. We're going to first start with the summary slide, and then we're going to get started on what the influence is. And then when you stay through to the end, we're going to talk about what the solution is. Okay. We use 3 different methods, and as you can see from the summary slide, the purple circle here is with the astrology, and the basic summary here is that we're going to get enforced balance. We're not being asked to balance our lives. It's going to be forced upon us, and by way of numerous oppositions, and oppositions can be seen as conflicts, challenges, etc. But all in all, it's a need for balance. It's kind of forced you to not choose a side. I think that's where we get into problems, choosing sides, but actually forcing you to work out the proper balance between the two. So that's the purple circle, the need for balance. And of course, we have a lunar eclipse on Tuesday. That's part of this opposition. It's a full moon, sun across the sky from the moon, i.e. another opposition, but there's more than just that one, lots more. Then we have the dream bot is showing us imbalance. It's not a direct correlation. And some people, I was thinking initially that it was like the opposite of balance. But clearly the dream bot or the collective unconscious is imbalanced, and you'll get to see that. And then the I-Ching, which is kind of odd, is saying, at least to me, I thought it was odd that the I-Ching is saying that the energy or the influence is forcing us to keep still. And I'm almost thinking that there's so much chaos, so much energetic changes that it's almost overwhelming, and we're kind of just left here waiting to see what's going to happen next. And in essence, I think that's not too far from what we see from the astrology. So let's get into all this data next. And this report is going to be good for July 15th through the 21st. I may do an adjunct for the lunar eclipse, but I can't promise because I've just been so busy in this past week. But if you haven't subscribed yet, please do so. Thank you, everybody, for your shares and comments. Okay, let's talk about the dream bot. And this is our collection of dreams, as you all know. And it's the latest one. It's done on this Sunday, the 14th. And this is where the collective unconscious is, as we know this because of the subconscious words through the dreams. The red arrows represent physical, fearful, yang, male energy, might, fear, dude, male, important, survive, much blood, physical. So very physical, very scared, very fearful, anxiety. That's a very chaotic position if that's our energetic influence from the collective. The opposite is with the blue arrows, and you can see that there's not nearly as many blue arrows as there are red arrows, but that's the caring, soul energy, female, nurturing. There is a lot of astrological Cancer in here with mom and care, and even female and energy. Then lastly, in the gold arrows, we have just basically start, finish. And I think that's very representative of an upcoming eclipse. All right, next. And you can see our summary slide at the lower right as we go through the astrology. We're going to start off on Monday, the 15th, with, I'm going to show you one day of this energy that's going to linger for a while. Is our 2 squares here that we talked about last time, but it was just finishing up on the last week as we started. And that's a square between Mars and Uranus. And right here represents a potential lot of imbalance. You've got Mercury also in the square, and squares are showing you obstacles, or maybe I can't communicate my changes. that could be an option. I'm blocked from carrying out meaningful changes. That's with the Mars influence. There's a lot of blocks to change right there. And that's kind of a paradox because we are kind of forced to change with these oppositions that I'm going to talk about next. So these red, let me get my highlighter out so that you can see this a little bit better, what I'm talking about. This square, both of these squares right here to Uranus, they have already gone exact last week, but that influence is still there. And because Mars and Mercury both within the orb of what's considered a square, which is 8 degrees. And so blocks to making changes, all right? And that's going to be a big paradox because you're going to see a bunch of these oppositions all throughout the week. And those oppositions are asking for balancing, and you can't balance if you're not changing anything unless you're already perfectly balanced, which I doubt most of us are. So we still have these, the Sun oppose Saturn and Pluto, and you're going to see let's just talk about Tuesday because it's more appropriate. But these aren't exact anymore, but they're still within the orb of influence. So here's Tuesday. This is what probably most of you have already heard about is the highlights over here with the moon as it starts to connect. Before it hits a conjunction with Saturn, it's actually going to make an opposition to Venus. And so, Venus is, if the moon is your emotional response and Venus is your nurturing close relationships, nurturing because it's in Cancer, and maybe even protective relationships, your closest relationships, you're going to be asked to balance that and balance your emotional reaction, your emotional response to those closest relationships. Then shortly thereafter, and I have all the aspects for the moon here. So it starts with Venus at, while most people are sleeping, right after midnight on the 16th. This is Tuesday morning. Then, while most of us are still asleep, then it's going to make a conjunction with Saturn, Saturn being the structure and for some people, the limitations of life. I'm going to see if I can zoom in here a little bit more. And so those structures of life are going to be highlighted through your emotions. You're going to be emotional because of probably some limitations, but this is not a bad thing. None of these aspects are good or bad. It's how it's used. And so if you recognize that you're being limited through your emotional responses of maybe frustration or maybe anger, resentment, that could highlight some breakthroughs in your life. Then it's going to make a conjunction with Pluto, Pluto being a very deep transformational planet. It's also kind of like underlying power and control. And so the moon, being our emotional response, is going to be responding to some potential changes. And this is going to be the last aspect that the moon makes before its lunar eclipse up here in the brightest area I've got with the moon, as it makes an opposition to the sun at 5:39 p.m. on Tuesday evening, but that's Eastern Standard Time. All these are Eastern times. And so we have technically within the orb of conjunction, Moon, Pluto, Saturn, opposing Sun, Venus, and depending on how big the orb is, probably Mercury is a little bit outside of that orb. But you have with Venus, you have relationships with the influence of Cancer, which is kind of nurturing relationships. Together with the Sun, that's your ego and creativity and your basic character. And then on the other side, you've got Pluto transforming everything with some underlying power and control. Saturn with strict ideals and what we've always known. This is the structure, the foundation of life, and I don't like changing it. And then you've got the moon, which is our emotional response. And so all that, as the light gets occluded so the light projected on the moon gets occluded by the surface of the Earth and partially eclipsed, at least for those in the southern hemisphere, I think in South America. But all over the world, you still have that energy where it just stops momentarily, and then that moon phasing starts again as it starts its waning process, getting smaller as it continues around the Earth. So a very transformative time. But basically you have, I can't even, I probably should have counted this before, but you have at least 5 different oppositions that are happening here, as well as conjunctions if you include the moon. And if oppositions are about balancing or the need to balance, then that is the influence, just as the summary stated. We need to balance, and the I-Ching will really highlight what we need to be doing here to maximize this energy of transformation and breakthrough. Okay, so hold on, let's get through the astrology, and then we'll get into what the solution is, and that will include for the lunar eclipse. All right, as we stated, even more oppositions. This one now, the moon, this is on Wednesday. The moon's going to make an opposition to Mercury. Mercury, remember, is in retrograde, and he's coming out of Leo, kind of going towards the sun now in terms of astrological alignments. And then the Venus aspect goes exact with Saturn at 1:33 a.m. And so you've got even more powerful oppositions. These are all just need for balance. And so if that feels like something, we all know what out of balance feels, and there's lots of different symptoms of feeling out of balance. But that's the influence, especially for Wednesday, is more need for balance. Keep in mind, though, you got this very quick in the evening, 6 p.m. on Wednesday evening, you've got a square with the moon and Uranus. And moon being just entering Aquarius, so kind of detached emotions. And you have obstacles with the square over to the change planet. So now our emotional responses, being a little bit detached, block us from actually making any changes. So there we go again. It's kind of like blocked from making your transformation that you just found out about here. And you've got the opposition to Mercury, which is more balancing your thoughts and your emotions. So rational versus feeling, and all that's going to be needing into balance. All right, so let's go into Thursday. Another opposition, moon opposed Mars. And now we've got to balance the get up and go, the energy, the forward yang, with our just feeling and detached, because it's an Aquarius, our detached feelings. The big news here is Venus making a trine to Neptune. So now our closest relationships, we can end up really having an easy time thinking about those relationships and how to make those better, and imagining a better life. Right? It doesn't have to be better, but it's just imaginations come easy, and that could be good or bad depending on what your mind is thinking about. But those come easy on Thursday afternoon at about 2 p.m. But that energy is going to stay for a lot longer than, say, like a moon aspect. So definitely throughout the rest of this day. I'll keep it even on Friday. On Friday, we have Mercury going into Cancer because it's in retrograde at 3 a.m. So maybe your dreams might change in character. Maybe instead of racing thoughts, your mind starts to slow down and start thinking more about home and relationships and that sort of thing, especially with the Venus trine Neptune still in its alignment trine. All right, let's get into the weekend. Yeah, you guessed it. You still got that opposition energy. This is Pluto making an opposition Pluto making opposition to Venus. And so transformative power for relationships, but this is an opposition so a need for balance. And in this case, probably Pluto is going to be more about power and control. So you're balancing power and control. You see that's very relevant to how you treat your closest relationships. And then you have a sextile with Uranus, so things start to open up about change, and you can, and as the moon goes into Pisces, now emotions make a lot more sense and a lot more felt, and you might get a lot more insights. And those are sextile. Sextile becomes easy to make changes, so that'll be really good. And Sunday, we have two conjunctions. We have Mercury and Sun are conjunct at 8:34 a.m. Eastern time. And then you've got the moon making a lot of different alignments. One of those with Venus. You can see Venus constantly getting a lot of tags from a lot of different places over the course of the week. So that's a hint for where we're going with the Sidereal Astrology later. But the moon makes a conjunction with Neptune. So just those imaginations and the insights, and then maybe possibly mysticism and spirituality become very much heightened. That's early in the morning on Sunday morning. So keep that one in mind. And this Venus opposition to Pluto that we mentioned earlier actually goes exact. And so that there's some oppositional energy or need for balance all week long with the Pluto, Saturn, and whatever planets are over here, as well as the moon transits. All right, you ready for the I-Ching reading? Here we go. When we cast the coins, we asked for the main energetic influence that most humans will have a high probability of feeling, and the answer, at least for the first hexagram, and we also stipulated that if there is a change hexagram, you can only have a maximum of 2 hexagrams in any I-Ching reading. And so the first one will be the influence, and the second one that I have underneath this piece of wood here is going to be the solution, but I want to occlude it so you're only paying attention to what I'm talking about. This hexagram is a mountain. This trigram is a mountain over a mountain. And so it's called the mountain 52. And it's temporary and self-imposed inaction for the benefit of assessment. That sounds like keeping still. Now, this was curious to me because it's about telling us what the influence is. That's what I thought was so really bizarre. It seems like we have to force ourselves. This seemed like more of a solution to me. But in essence, if you put this into perspective with the astrology, all these oppositions, I think what it's saying is that it really is just so stimulating and so oppositional that we're just kind of caught in a juxtaposition. And so the best solution here is just temporarily self-imposed inaction for the benefit of assessment. Keeping still, and I'm going to read a little bit of the Book of Changes. Oh, I want to make sure that it's not a state of not doing. And so true quiet means keeping still when the time has come to keep still, and going forward when the time has come to go forward. In this way, rest and movement are in agreement. So in essence, the balancing is, when do I do, when do I be? How do I balance those two things? And I think that is going to come naturally. It's not something that you're going to have to try to do. So for example, like overwhelm, I can see that, I don't know if the astrology is correct, overwhelm might be present for a lot of people. And that just automatically feels like inaction. I really can't do much. All right, so the image of 52 is mountains standing close together, the image of keeping still. The superior man does not permit thoughts to go beyond his situation. It's not a lot of forethought. In other words, these alignments are going to tend to force us to stay in the present moment. Now, one thing I want to show you is all these change lines on the 1, 2, 4, 5, and 6. This is the most change lines we've ever had. And what that means is the solution is almost as far different as you can get than the influence. And what we asked the solution to be was to harness the energy from the influence. But we're not at the solution just yet. I want to read what these change lines are in the Book of Changes. All right, so 6 at the beginning. 1 sees things intuitively as they are. A man who halts at the beginning, so long as he has not yet abandoned truth, finds the right way. But persisting firmness is needed to keep one from drifting irresolutely. In the second place, the calves, keeping his calves still. He cannot rescue him whom he follows. His heart is not glad. What does that mean? The leg cannot move independently. It depends on the movement of the body. So in a way, you can't really be going against the grain during this time. The universe apparently, if the I-Ching is right, is not going to let you go against the grain a whole lot. Okay, so in the fourth place, we're going up here now. Keeping the heart at rest is an important function, leading in the end to complete elimination of egoic drives or egotistical drives. Even though at this point one does not yet remain free from all the dangers of doubt and unrest, this frame of mind is not a mistake, as it leads ultimately to that other higher level. And with the Venus trine Neptune aspect is going to be that higher level, particularly when it has to do with your relationships. 6th in the 5th. So this is the second to last line. Keeps the jaw still. The words have order. Remorse disappears. In essence, think before speaking. Okay. And then lastly, 9 at the top means noble-hearted, keeping still, good fortune. This marks the consummation of an effort to attain tranquility. One is at rest, not merely in a small circumscribed way in regard to matters of detail, but one has also a general resignation in regard to life as a whole. Now, if this is an influence and not a choice, wouldn't that mean kind of more overwhelm? I suppose there's probably some others where maybe just so many blocks that you just can't move forward. All right, so now, once you're feeling in that rested state, or at least keeping still and feeling the need for balance, let's look at the solution. When you apply these change lines, we have a lot of yang lines that are built under one yin line, and 43 is a result. And this is called breakthrough, resoluteness. In order for achievement to be maintained, a new order must be established. All right, so now, what my best advice to be is, if you're not keeping still, well, as in the influence, especially throughout the lunar eclipse, you're going to miss out on the fundamental insight about how to break through. I think that's the whole key here. And so the rest of the week is building this new order in accordance with the I-Ching. Now, so my simple advice in the breakthrough and resoluteness in accordance with the I-Ching is this. It's act therapy at its best. It says, look at your highest values. A part of what this 43 hexagram says is that we spend way too much time fighting the battles that don't really need to be fought. We feel like we need to be fighting them, but we waste so much energy fighting them that we forget about the biggest things that matter to us. And so we miss out on a whole bunch of energy that could be going towards the life we want, but instead we hold ourselves back by continuing to fight the fight that just keeps holding us back, that keeps us in that old cage, the kind of the very Saturn kind of cage. Pluto wants to break us out. Uranus wants to break us out. And certainly the eclipse really wants to break us out. What's interesting also is that we were warned last week that there was going to be a false sense of breakthrough. And so if you honored that and just continued to keep still, that was the solution. The solution ended up being the influence this week. And now you're going to get the insight on how to break through. And so the hint is just look at your highest values. What matters to you the most in life? And then when you're feeling that urge to go do, instead of fighting the old battles or resisting the old problems or, tackling the things that keep you weighed down, start looking towards the future. Start looking for the things in your life that matter to you the most and making those better. And that's a very ACT therapy concept called values and also committed action. Commit to making those values more prominent in your life. And that can be a breakthrough. And you save the energy that you would have expended on fighting and more through just breaking through. All right, so here we go. For the lunar eclipse, the energy resets. It's a physical reset. It's also a very spiritual and energetic reset, but followed by a major breakthrough. If you're resisting through that, or if you're not keeping still through that process, you're going to really miss out on the opportunity for later breakthrough. So keeping still through that process is important. And this one is going to be out to Interzension. So find us on Instagram and Facebook, Interzension, and you can have these influence charts or the current energy playbook charts. All right. What questions do you guys have? Comment below. Thank you for your shares. And hopefully getting more videos out, but I'm currently taking a course that will hopefully enhance these CIRF reports even more. And so let me know what you think and have a wonderful, wonderful breakthrough week by keeping still. Thank you.